Good afternoon. My name is Scott Parker and I'm here today with Shawn Zenz, and we will be talking about Automation Manager quick wins, simple policies that can save you time. I'm Scott Parker, the Product Marketing Manager here at Enable, and Shawn Zenz is here from Product Management and he owns the Automation Manager product. Okay, so some quick SolarWinds Enable fast facts. We're really here, we're geared to provide IT management software that is powerful, yet easy to use and affordable. That's really kind of our mantra. We really strive to take our partners and their environments and make you the most successful MSPs we possibly can. Really, we want to be your IT partner. We want to help you get out there, sell your product into the MSP market, and we want to grow with you. And that really is our goal, and is really the whole reason we offer these webinars, to give you that bit of a leg up, to give you a little bit more visibility into sort of those tips and tricks that we may know here that we want to share with you and help you get out to your customers. What do we measure our success by? Well, we measure our success by customer retention. We look at our MSP customers' recurring revenue. We love to see that grow, of course, and your customer growth as well as our customer growth. So again, we work together as a team, and we are channel only. We're really not selling into your end user environments. We sell only to MSPs. So we are 100% focused on you and your own growth. We have 3,600 MSP customers currently, 160,000 managed small medium businesses underneath those customers, and over 3 million managed endpoints currently through the N-Central system. We have offices globally in Canada, the USA, Ireland, Netherlands, where I just came back from, Austria, Singapore, and the Philippines. So why automation? Well, we've gone out and we've talked to many partners who have spent quite a bit of time with automation, examining their own processes internally and then building automation based on that. And we've had a lot of really positive feedback. One example that we have on the screen here, one partner told us that they spend about almost half an hour per ticket because of automation. They get 35 tickets a day on average they can address through automation. That would be almost half an hour times those 35 tickets. That's almost 9 hours really saved per day, thanks to automation. And then based on the rate that they would be paying out for a tech to do this by hand, they're saving $306 saved per day. And over the course of a month, that could be almost $7,000. So automation is absolutely worth it in terms of time saving and, of course, value saving as well. What are the things that people are automating? We have a lot of partners that really get deep in automation, and some of the biggest success stories we hear are around things like discovery of devices, the automation through service templates and rules for thresholds and self-healing, management of things such as patch management, proactive maintenance. For example, if you do regularly scheduled proactive maintenance in your environments, in many contracts, including my own in the past, you may have something where you are obligated to clean out user systems, for example, temporary files, or simply perform maintenance tasks leveraging software that's installed on the systems. Doing that through automation is far better than doing it by hand. Obviously, it's a situation of where I could sit down a few techs and they could do this by hand each and every week, or I can simply have a small automation policy built in N-Central and have N-Central go out and do that work for me, saving my team time and obviously money by going through a full automation cycle in N-Central. Remote control with direct support, remediation and self-healing. So if you have something that regularly has issues, services failing, various applications that occasionally need you to clear out a file or what have you, automation is really the key for that. Look for those simple tasks that require a lot of man hours but maybe aren't overly complex. Focus on those with your automation and try and get those taken care of by the system, rather than having a technician who has to keep their eye on something and then regularly remote in and make changes. Oh, of course, you can also automate reports if you have quarterly business reviews, regular technical reviews internally. Those are the sorts of things that are going to be coming up on a regular schedule. So let's go into N-Central and make sure we automate those so that they're automatically produced and left for you either in your email or in a file repository, ready for you to get in there and review them, rather than you having to go through the process of logging into the system, creating the report, running the report, and then being able to review. Considerable time savings doing that. All right, so now Shawn is here. He's going to talk to us today about an automation policy he's created, and I'm going to hand it over to Shawn, and away you go.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for the introduction, Scott. Again, my name is Shawn Zenz. I'm the product manager for Central Core, as well as the automation manager. And the focus of today's webinar will be quite technical. We're taking a look at quick wins, very little effort automation policies that turn into a huge time savings. Now, there are many examples that you can think of day to day, and I often suggest for our partners that the best way to identify and find those little quick win policies is to take a look at your tickets. Take a look at your top 10 call drivers. Spend a little bit of time to review or what type of tickets being created the most within your NOC team or your technician team, and focus down on those issues that ultimately take the most amount of time. You'll notice as you go through them, there's some things that maybe the ticket is open for an average of 20 minutes or 25 minutes, but the time to invest to actually resolve that problem, in an automation policy, maybe you can do that in 60 minutes. So you're getting an ROI in honestly just a couple of cases that come through. I want to focus down on a particular problem today, which is password management and more specifically around the Windows Probe. As you may know, the Windows Probe is absolutely vital. It's critical to an essential deployment. That probe sits on a server, it deploys new agents, it monitors network devices, and that Windows Probe uses credentials that, if you recall, you set during the install. It uses a set of credentials for starting the service. As you may know, Windows services, you can set them to log on as a certain account, as well as the actual discovery itself to go out and push agents uses a set of credentials. These sets of credentials are the same. Ideally, it's the same account, of course, and when you installed it, you set only one. But as we go through this policy, I'll kind of highlight the differences and I'll show you where we're changing it in two different places. What I really want you to get out of this as a takeaway is that this is just one example. This is one example where I can show you investing the next 20 minutes or so, 15 to 20 minutes here, that you can turn this policy into hours of time saving in the future. But it's just one example. So as we go through this, we're going to get very technical. But as we go through this, keep in mind that there's other examples in your environment. Highlight, go find them, search for them, and see where you can save that time in the future with just a small amount of upfront time and energy on it. So what I'm going to do here is I will go ahead and I'll jump into the Automation Manager. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the Automation Manager, you'll notice this one looks a little different. I'm using the most recent release, which we currently have 10.1 in beta, so I'm using the release which is part of 10.1. What we go through here, though, is for the most part, it's the same to previous releases. If you want to get access to 10.1, it's an open public beta, so feel free to sign up for it over on the Enable Resource Center, and you can test out the new look and feel and the new features that exist in it as well. So, like I said, we're going to focus down on a particular policy today, and this will be around a password for our Windows Probe. Now, what we'll do here is I'm going to take you through the steps, one by one, object by object, of how we accomplish this. If I was doing this manually, what I would do is I would log into a server. I'd RDP over to the server where the probe's installed. I would stop all the services associated to the probe. I would change the account under the login tab. I would then create a file, a startup file, and put it into the bin directory of the software probe. And I would go ahead and start all the services again, and that would effectively change both the password it discovers devices with, as well as the password it starts the service with. That whole process, if you're good, you can do it in under 2 minutes. But what happens when you have 25 customers? That's a fair amount of time. Take that and get 50 customers, 100 customers, maybe you have 500 customers under management in Central. How often do you need to change that password? For some of us, we never need to change that password, but maybe someone left the team, a technician left the team that knew the password. It's of course best practice to go change it. Or maybe you have clients that require passwords are changed every 6 months, every 3 months. Maybe it's an internal policy to change passwords frequently. What we want to do is not have to go spend 2 minutes per customer every 90 days. It's something that we can automate, of course, and it's something that we want to automate. So keep in mind those steps I mentioned there that we do manually. We're going to recreate them here. I find that the easiest way to create an automation policy is to not touch my laptop in front of me, but to take a piece of paper and a pen and draw out what I'm trying to accomplish. This is very much a whiteboard. It's a designer. It's a drag and drop interface. So what's easier than writing what I'm trying to accomplish first, and then mapping it to the objects in the Automation Manager. There's about 650 objects in here. They cover just about everything you can think of, which means it's really good to have an understanding of your goal, as you come through and build it. Now, I mentioned the step one was to actually stop the services. So let's go ahead and use the object, the stop service object. I'm cheating a little bit today. I have this little cheat sheet in front of me for all the details that I need within my policy, and the first one being what are the service names. So I will go ahead and I'll copy and paste these in so you don't have to watch me kind of browse around Windows. So I'll go ahead and I'll stop the services as part of the Windows probe. That maintenance service is actually a babysitting service in the sense that if the Windows probe service stops, the maintenance service will restart it. So, of course, make sure you get rid of that one first so that you don't run into a situation where it's restarting it halfway through your policy and you didn't intend for that to happen. So there you can see I'm stopping all three Windows services. If I want to test this, I can run it against my local machine. What better way to test than to install a probe on my local machine and actually go through the steps with my probe? And make sure, of course, that it is stopping the appropriate Windows services. Now, the next thing I mentioned here was after I stop these services, I go in and I set the credentials in the Login tab. Well, what credentials am I setting? So I need to provide the domain, I need to provide a user account, I need to provide a password. Well, right off the bat, if I have to hard code a domain in my policy, right off the bat, this stops being scalable. Now I need a different policy per customer. Don't want to do that, of course. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an object that will actually get domain information and return a whole bunch of information about my domain to the policy so I can reuse a lot of the information. My username and password, I'm going to say in my scenario, my username and password is going to be the same for every customer. It's going to be some sort of service account I create. Domain, of course, is different. So I know that I'll grab domain information, but things like the username and password, instead I'm going to create what are called input parameters. Anytime that I want to pass something to the Automation Manager, so 2 weeks from now I'm running this through N-central and I want to modify the username and password, well, I would use an input parameter to accomplish that. So I'm going to click on this input here, I'm going to click add, and I'm going to say that this is the username. So this will be the Windows account for the probe. I don't need to predefine it. Feel free to if you want to. And this will be the password field. And this is the password for the account. Now, the type of information you choose here is important. A string obviously is just a bunch of letters there, but for the password field, I'll make sure I select password. That's important because when I go to run this through N-central later, the password field will be encrypted. So at this point, what my policy is going to let me do is if I go to run this, it stops a bunch of services, it lets me pass the username and password, it finds the domain, doesn't do anything further than that, but for the most part, I'm kind of 1/3 of the way there, if you remember my manual steps. So the next thing I'm going to do here is now that I have that information set up and available to run this task, I'm going to go ahead and create a file. So I mentioned that it's kind of a two-step process here. I need to change the account for the Windows service, as well as I need to change the account in which the probe discovers devices. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a file. This part is pretty slick. All I need to do here is supply it with where the file goes and what the file is called. And like I said, I've got a little cheat sheet here, which is just the path to the bin folder. You'll notice that it says program files x86. You can, in your policy, if you'd like, accommodate whether it's a 64-bit server or a 32-bit server. I figured it's pretty unlikely there's going to be a 32-bit server, but you have the capability using objects like get OS architecture that'll let you define, should you, if it is a 32-bit, how do you handle that situation? Now, the actual file here is going to be the startup.ini file. And just so you know, all this detail is actually in the online help, but the beauty is we're automating it here. The online help is going to tell you the manual process. Now, the next piece of this is I've created the file, but I need to populate the file with some detail. And the detail I need to give it is right here. It needs, in this format, it needs the username equals the domain, as well as my user account, and it also needs the password which I'm setting. Now, I mentioned there's 650 objects, but in a situation where there is not an object to do what you're looking for, in my case, add text to an INI file, there wasn't an object to accomplish this. So what I'm going to do here is use the run script object. The run script object is a catch-all. This is where I can put PowerShell script into an automation policy, and it will run it as just like any other object and give me the results of those details there. Now, I don't in any capacity pretend to be a scripting expert, especially PowerShell. I've watched YouTube playlists on how PowerShell works, and I think, Scott, you're on the same boat as me.
Yep, same boat.
So the first thing I did here is, well, how do I add text to a file through PowerShell? And within about, 30 seconds, I found the scriptlet called add content, and I was able to very quickly go ahead and add content to startup.ini, and when it came to format, the format was simply quote username equals domain and the user. Now, I'm going to return to this in a minute. You may be looking at it going, I don't understand, you're hard coding it. Give me 1 second here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll say, in the first line, you're adding username equals the domain. And the second line, it's the password. Password equals whatever the password is we set. And that's it. When I click OK, that is the script that will run in sequence, of course, starting from the top. And it'll go to that run script, and it'll create the file first. Then I'll go ahead and add the content to the script. But looking at that, there's a problem right off the bat, which is domain, that's not a variable. Password, that is clearly not a variable. This is just text. So we need to create some variables as part of this script. Things that, as a technician, I can actually pass to it when the script goes to execute. Very simple here. All I'm doing is, under input parameter, I need to pass, if you recall, domain, username, password. 3 variables. And this will be the domain field. I'm not overly concerned with how I display it here, but where I get it from is important. I'm asking the automation policy to say, I've used this object further up my policy called get domain information. Here's what it's going to return back to me, and as you can see right there, the domain name is exactly what I need. So I can go ahead and I can click OK. Click OK a second time, and there's 1 of 3. So let me quickly come in here and say, I also need the username, so I'm going to call this script username, so I can be unique with my naming scheme here. And the value for this is that input parameter. That's what the technician types into this policy when he goes to run it. Same idea here. Script password. It's a password field. The type is a little different here. It's a password. And the value is going to be, again, the password technician types. What I've got now is I've got a script that I can pass variables to when I'm running it from N-Central. There's my variables right there. So very quickly I can come in here and say anywhere where I hard-coded information that I shouldn't have, I didn't want to, paste in the variable, paste the other 2 variables, and we're good to go. Now I would say complexity-wise, this is kind of somewhere in the middle. It's not that easy. There's a little bit of logic here. It took a little bit of time to build it. But there's some policies that you'll go through, just the simplest of items, like starting and stopping services, doing cleanup of temp files and device maintenance that you can download from the Enable Resource Center as they've been created by other partners or SolarWinds Enable employees, as well as built right into the N-Central server. There is a pre-built policy list in your server already. Now, once I have a policy here that stops the services, grabs domain information, is going to pass it into this file that I'm automatically creating. There's a lot of neat stuff going on here. I need to accomplish the other half of this, which was I need to make sure that Windows service, when it starts, is starting with the appropriate credentials. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use an object that allows me to set credentials. And I'll do that as the next step. Now, the credentials are actually in the Windows Software Probe service. So let me go ahead and grab that name so I don't have to type it over and over and over again. And I'll paste it here in the bottom. But you'll see here under the username, we've got an issue. And the issue is that a Windows service demands it to be formatted in a certain way. I'm automatically grabbing the domain information as part of the policy. I don't want a technician to have to type it in. He's only going to type in the username. So what we need to do is we need to take two different bits of information, that are being provided to the policy in two different ways and combine them together. And we do that through a very clever little object here. Like I said, there's hundreds of objects, and believe me, you can't memorize them, but there is an online help here and there is a search. So what we can do is we can say, well, we're going to take information from two different places and combine them together. So as you can see below, it wants the domain first, then the username, just like any other Windows. So I'll come in here and I'll say I want the domain first. That was input 0. Then I want the username. And I grab that again from someone typing that into the policy. Then I'm going to use this text below, and this is going to choose how it gets formatted. So it is as simple as domain \username, and that's it. So now I've taken 2 bits information. Oh, I had a space in there. Let me get rid of that. 2 bits of information, and I've combined them together, and I'm going to pass those. There's my format string. Pass that into the set service credentials here, and well, that's it. There's my username. Let me link that to the password as well, and there we go. You're typing the password once in N-Central, but it's being used in multiple places, as you can see. Now, once I've done that, it's time to start to actually start these services. So I can come in here and go ahead and start all 3 of these services. There we go. Now I'll go ahead and I'll use my cheat sheet again here. I'm going to start the maintenance service last because I don't want the maintenance service to try to start the probe service, and also my policy is trying to start the probe service. I'm going to control which happens first. So I'll go ahead and I'll start the probe first. Then I'll start that syslog service, which is just an optional guy. And lastly, I'll start the maintenance service.
Yeah, just for anyone who's not familiar with the maintenance service, what it will do is if you shut down the main probe service, its job is to try and restart it. So that's why Shawn's putting it last. We don't want it trying to start up the service while we are also trying to start that service through an AMP.
Perfect. Now, at this point, I have a pretty thorough policy. This policy covers off just about everything I do manually. I can kind of take this to the next level if I want to. If I am running this across multiple customers, well, the actual behavior is, that file we created kind of halfway through the process, that file we created up here, if it's successful, if it did change the credentials successfully, that file disappears after the probe starts. We passed a password into an INI file. We obviously don't want to save that anymore. So that file gets automatically deleted. Well, I could, as part of this policy, do something like check if the file still exists. Therefore, I know the policy couldn't change the password for me. It didn't complete the action. And create an event log and notify me. Or log the message, and I'll go take a look at the results once I run it through N-Central. There's many approaches to this. There's no wrong answer. There's lots of right answers. And and you can keep track of that type of information. When I'm done, I click upload, I send it back to Incentral. I can come to Incentral here and I can go ahead and run this. I can run this policy against all my Windows probes. I can create a filter so that it finds just Windows probes through Incentral if I want to. Obviously, there's no impact of doing it on a device that doesn't have a probe, but it won't try to create a file if it shouldn't. Therefore, so I can select just my Windows probes using a filter. If you want more details on creating a filter, there's a good training video over on the Enable Resource Center. And I can go ahead, I can run that on demand, I can schedule it on a recurring basis. It's completely up to me, all based on your policy or your customer policy. But this policy is a quick and dirty policy. It took less than 20 minutes to actually build, and it saves an immense amount of time moving forward. And like I said, this is just one example. We could sit here and rhyme off and name off a bunch of examples, but the best way to approach this, in my opinion, would be to go look at your ticket statistics and your stats, identify those top 10 call drivers, and automate those processes. You can't necessarily always resolve the problem. Obviously, there may be manual intervention on some of these, but you can create diagnostic policies. You can automate a lot of the policies or problems, I should say, that are frankly just not that interesting. Changing a password is not that interesting. I don't know if you disagree with me.
We do it all the time, though, so it's very
not that interesting. So it's a key candidate for, there's a time sink involved, and it's something you can easily automate moving forward. Over on the Enable Resource Center, I mentioned before that on the Resource Center there are scripts and policies you can download. A couple to highlight, a colleague of ours, Trevor McCord on the sales engineering team, just uploaded some the other day, which was to install Firefox, install Java on Mac devices. So you can actually run that through the Automation Manager. It uses a Windows probe as a middleman and actually goes and installs Java, installs Firefox. And in fact, there's also other policies that will keep a device up to date, a Mac device up to date, using the same logic. These are essentially connecting from the Windows probe to the Mac device over SSH and executing commands to keep them up to date and to install software. Excellent. So what we'll do next here, I know we're kind of running out of time, so what we'll do next here is we'll take a look at the questions and we'll answer any questions.
All right, so I have one that I'm going to answer right away, and maybe you can just review a couple of these and see if you want to pick out the next one. So I see we have one question here. Someone was asking, you're using the latest version of Automation Manager. Mm-hmm. When does that come to market? When can we get our hands on it?
Yep, so this is part of Incentral 10.1, which is currently in beta. It's been in beta for a little bit of time now, and we have a ton of customers on it. A new version of Automation Manager obviously is just one piece of the pie. There's a ton of features in 10.1. So if you're interested, over on the Enable Resource Center, you can, let me quickly show this. There's a beta program there at the bottom. You can sign up for the beta, and you can get access to 10.1 by installing it on, maybe if you've got like a spare server or set it up in its own VM, and you can test it out. Comes with a beta test plan, so it tells you all the features. It shows you how to test them, how to use them. Gives you the opportunity, if you'd like, to provide feedback to myself and other members of the product management team.
All right. Did you see another one that you wanted to tackle?
Yeah, so Michael has a good question here, which is quick advice on doing probes installed on different drive letters. That is a very good one. Michael, I'd have to probably review it more and dig a little deeper. I'm assuming there's probably an easy way to get install path out of the registry. So maybe based on like application name or something like that. But it would take me a little bit of Googling to find that answer.
Yeah, fair enough. And we have emails here, so if we come up with something else, maybe we can send something his way.
For sure.
Here's a good one. Do you need a probe to run automations on client computers? Do you want to handle that one?
Sure, for sure. Absolutely not. So Automation Manager runs essentially from the agent. So whether you are managing one home computer, one PC at home, or you're managing 1,000 users in an environment, it doesn't matter. The Automation Manager actually runs at the agent itself. It doesn't require a probe. I used a probe example today because I know from my 5 years on the sales engineering team that password management is annoying. So I figured it was a good example to show the power of Automation Manager and where you can save time.
Fantastic. All right, well, I think that pretty much covers it. And any other questions we didn't get to, I'll certainly make sure that we put in the FAQ for the post for the web, and we will make sure we address anything. So that was great, Shawn. Really appreciate your time here today. And I think I speak for everyone when I say that automation looks like a really excellent feature to start bringing into the N-central world. If you're not already using it, highly recommend you start getting into it. It can save time, it can save money. It's absolutely, what you want to be doing as far as moving towards into the future. And I think you've given some really good hints and tips as to how people can start doing that in their own environment. All right, well, thanks everyone for participating today. We really enjoy these webinars, and we're really happy that you take the time to spend with us. So again, thank you very much from Enable, and we will talk to you all again soon. See you at the next webinar.